French military personnel have reportedly arrived in Côte d'Ivoire. This sudden deployment has caught many observers by surprise. They are here to ensure the protection of President Alassane Ouattara. This development occurs against a backdrop of increasing regional instability. Security concerns have been mounting in West Africa for several months. The arrival of French forces signals a potentially significant shift in the security arrangements for the Ivorian head of state. The news of French soldiers landing in Abidjan spread quickly. It has generated considerable discussion both locally and internationally. Details regarding the exact number of troops and the duration of their stay remain somewhat unclear. The Ivorian government has yet to issue a comprehensive statement detailing the specifics of this new arrangement with Paris. This deployment is particularly noteworthy given recent history. France had been in the process of significantly reducing its military footprint in Côte d'Ivoire. Therefore, this new arrival represents a stark contrast to that established trend. The international community is watching closely to understand the full implications of this unexpected military reinforcement. The primary objective of the newly arrived French contingent is unambiguous. Their mission is dedicated to the personal security of President Alassane Ouattara. This tasking indicates a high level of concern within official circles regarding potential dangers to the Ivorian leader. Such direct protection by foreign troops is a significant step. It underscores the gravity of the perceived threats. The deployment suggests that existing national security apparatuses might be deemed insufficient. This focus on safeguarding a head of state points to a volatile security environment. The decision implies that intelligence assessments have identified credible risks. The French military, with its experience in complex security operations, is seen as a capable force to provide this enhanced layer of security. The specifics of the threats remain undisclosed to the public. The presence of French soldiers is intended to act as a deterrent. This protective detail is likely to be highly specialized. The international community, particularly regional bodies like ECOWAS, will be monitoring how this direct French involvement in presidential security unfolds. Prior to this unexpected arrival, the narrative was one of French military disengagement. A significant withdrawal of French forces from Côte d'Ivoire had been planned and widely publicized. This drawdown was scheduled to culminate in February 2025. The main French military base at Port Bouet, located in Abidjan, was a key part of this plan. It was set to be formally handed over to the armed forces of Côte d'Ivoire on February 20, 2025. This date was marked as a historic moment in the evolution of Franco-Ivorian military relations. The planned handover ceremony at Port Bouet was expected to be a high-profile event. Dignitaries from both nations were slated to attend. French Defense Minister Sébastien Lecornu was anticipated to be present. His Ivorian counterpart, Defense Minister Tené Birahima Ouattara, was also scheduled to officiate the proceedings. The presence of such senior officials underscored the importance both governments attached to this transition. The announcement of this significant withdrawal came directly from President Alassane Ouattara himself. He had first mentioned the plans in December 2024. The Port Bouet base housed nearly 1,000 French soldiers. This withdrawal was part of a broader reorganization of military ties, especially following French troop departures from other Sahelian nations. Several key reasons were cited for the planned French military withdrawal from Côte d'Ivoire. President Alassane Ouattara emphasized the modernization of the Ivorian army. He suggested that the national forces had reached a level of competence where they could increasingly take charge of the country's defense. The development and professionalization of the Ivorian military were presented as primary drivers for this strategic shift. It was framed as a natural evolution of the country's defense capabilities. The move was also described as part of a wider reorganization of military relations. France had recently withdrawn its troops from countries like Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. These departures often occurred under pressure from new military governments in those nations. Therefore, recalibrating the French presence in stable partner countries like Côte d'Ivoire seemed a logical step. The number of troops affected by this planned withdrawal was significant. Close to 1,000 French soldiers stationed at the Port Bouet base were to be redeployed or returned to France. The plan included approximately 80 French military personnel remaining in Abidjan. The planned French withdrawal from Côte d'Ivoire was not an isolated event. It formed part of a much broader trend of French military realignment across the African continent, particularly in West Africa. Over the past few years, France has significantly reduced its military presence in several former colonies. This pattern of departures has been most notable in the Sahel region. French forces have left Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, often following demands from new military juntas. This trend extended beyond the Sahel. In November 2024, both Senegal and Chad also announced the departure of French soldiers from their territories. Paris appeared to be actively reshaping its political and military influence. The strategy involved moving away from large, permanent troop deployments towards more flexible, perhaps less visible forms of cooperation. Growing anti-French sentiment in several West African nations played a significant role. African nations themselves are increasingly seeking to diversify their security partnerships. Following these extensive withdrawals, France's significant military posts in Africa would become more concentrated. A key factor driving the changes in French military presence is the evolving foreign policy of African nations. Countries across the continent, including Côte d'Ivoire and Senegal, are actively seeking to diversify their international partnerships. This move is not necessarily about rejecting former colonial powers entirely. Instead, it is about broadening their diplomatic and strategic options. These nations are exploring stronger ties with a range of global actors. Potential new partners include emerging economic powerhouses like China and Turkey, as well as Brazil, the wealthy Gulf Arab monarchies, and notably Russia. This diversification strategy is partly fueled by a desire for greater autonomy on the world stage. Public sentiment also plays a crucial role in this shift. Across many parts of West Africa, there is a noticeable and growing wave of anti-French feeling. The search for new security partners is also a pragmatic response to evolving threats. Some African nations feel that traditional security arrangements have not adequately addressed challenges like jihadist insurgencies. The security landscape in West Africa remains fraught with challenges. The French troops previously stationed at Port Bouet in Côte d'Ivoire were involved in regional efforts to combat jihadist groups. These extremist organizations have been a persistent threat, particularly in the Sahel. Since around 2020, there has been a slow but steady expansion of their activities. They are increasingly making inroads into coastal West African states, including nations like Senegal, Benin, Togo, and Côte d'Ivoire. This southward creep of jihadist violence is a major source of anxiety for regional governments and international observers. The groups, often affiliated with Al-Qaeda or ISIS, exploit local grievances, porous borders, and governance vacuums to extend their influence. Their attacks target both security forces and civilians. The potential reduction of experienced counterterrorism forces, such as the French, raises legitimate questions about the capacity of regional armies to contain this expanding threat effectively on their own. Some security analysts have expressed significant doubts about whether the departure of French troops, as originally planned, would lead to an improvement in regional security. Experts point out that while national armies are strengthening, the fight against well-entrenched and adaptable militant groups requires sustained, coordinated efforts and specialized capabilities. The shifting alliances in the region add another layer of complexity. Côte d'Ivoire holds a position of significant strategic importance, both for France and for the wider West African region. Historically, it has been a key ally of France in this part of the continent. This long-standing relationship has encompassed deep economic, political, and military ties since its independence. The French presence, including the military base at Port Bouet, was a testament to this close partnership. Even with the planned drawdowns, the underlying importance of Côte d'Ivoire to French regional strategy was expected to ensure continued, albeit modified, engagement between the two nations. The economic profile of Côte d'Ivoire further elevates its strategic value. The nation is the world's largest producer of cocoa, a vital commodity in global markets. Beyond agriculture, it possesses substantial natural resources. These include significant deposits of oil and natural gas, as well as gold and other minerals. Despite the earlier plans for a major base handover and troop reduction, it was always anticipated that some form of Franco-Ivorian cooperation would persist. The intention was for France to continue training and cooperating with local Ivorian forces. The sudden new deployment to protect President Ouattara, however, introduces a fresh dynamic to this evolving relationship. The recent arrival of French troops in Côte d'Ivoire, tasked specifically with protecting President Alassane Ouattara, marks a significant and somewhat perplexing development. It occurs in May 2025, notably after the scheduled February 2025 withdrawal and handover of the main French base at Port Bouet. This new deployment appears to run counter to the established narrative of French military disengagement from the region. It sends mixed signals about France's long-term intentions and its future security role not only in Côte d'Ivoire, but across West Africa. This sudden move highlights the acute security concerns that persist at the highest levels in Abidjan. The explicit mission to protect the head of state suggests a perceived, immediate, and serious threat that necessitated such direct foreign military intervention. While the details of this threat remain confidential, the action itself speaks volumes about the perceived vulnerabilities. it raises critical questions about the current stability within Côte d'Ivoire and the capacity of its national security apparatus to manage all emergent challenges independently. The broader context of France's military realignment in Africa cannot be ignored. This new Ivorian deployment suggests that France is still willing to engage decisively when its core interests or the stability of key allies are deemed to be under threat. Ultimately, this event opens a complex new chapter in Franco-Ivorian relations and potentially for French engagement in Africa.